Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning into this story. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. I don't know if anyone will ever read this, but I need to record what's been happening, to keep myself sane, if nothing else. My name is Jenna, and I've been sheltering inside the West Wing greenhouse of Blackwood University for the past several days. I can't say precisely how long I've been here. I've lost track of time. The clocks in the greenhouse are either broken or too far away for me to see through the glass. My phone battery is low, so I'm saving the last bit of juice for an emergency broadcast. Outside, the campus is eerily silent now, except for distant echoes that sometimes sound like footsteps. Or worse. The apocalypse feels so sudden, though I know the signs were there long before it started. The quiet corridors of our science building had been off limits for a week prior to the official announcement. A quarantine, the administrators said. Then came the first local news bulletins about a strange flu. We were instructed to stay indoors. Next, the TV stations ran those unstoppable headlines: zombie outbreak, zombie virus, infected, end of the world, in big, bold letters across every screen. It still feels impossible to comprehend, but I know it's real. In the final moments before the campus power grid began shutting down, I caught sight of a digital ticker on the local news feed. CDC confirms rapid spread of zombie virus. Nations declare a state of emergency. Then the feed cut to static. If you're reading this, you already know how quickly an outbreak can bring society to its knees. But maybe you don't know how it started here at Blackwood University. Maybe, like me, you're searching for answers. Let me begin at the moment I realized just how bad things had gotten. Day 1. I was working on a research project for my botany course. My mentor, Dr. Baines, had given me special permission to do some late-night observation in the greenhouse. It's a sprawling structure of glass panels, metal supports, and carefully controlled environmental zones. The main greenhouse houses hundreds of exotic and modified plant species, many still in experimental stages. My phone buzzed with an emergency alert the moment I finished adjusting the overhead grow lights. The text read, "Zombie outbreak detected. Seek immediate shelter." It felt like a cosmic joke, the kind of ominous message you'd see in a horror movie. But within minutes, I heard distant screams from across campus. Doors were slamming, and car engines were roaring to life. Something was clearly happening. When I tried to leave the greenhouse, I saw shadows moving across the lawns and heard panicked shouting. I hurried back inside, locked the heavy glass doors and pulled the shutters down across the windows. Through gaps in the shutters, I caught glimpses of people running. The floodlights on the campus walkways revealed some of them stumbling in strange, jerking motions, their eyes vacant. It was like a wave of confusion had swept across the grounds. People were yelling that the infected were biting anyone they could catch. I didn't want to believe it. But the commotion outside grew so intense that I had no choice but to hide. I turned off most of the greenhouse lights to avoid drawing attention. For the rest of the night, I cowered among the potted plants. My mind was racing with questions. Was this truly the zombie apocalypse? How far had it spread beyond our campus? I was afraid to peek outside again, afraid of what I might see. Day 2. Morning light filtered in through the glass roof. The campus was startlingly quiet. I mustered the courage to crack open the shutters just a little. From my vantage point, I could see papers and backpacks strewn across the main lawn. A few cars stood abandoned on the campus roads with their doors wide open. There was no sign of normal life, no typical morning rush of students heading to class. It looked like a ghost town. That was the moment I realized I was alone. The solitude hit me like a punch to the gut. My first instinct was to gather supplies, so I decided to check the greenhouse storage room. While rummaging for bottled water and packaged seeds, I found a stack of documents that didn't belong there. Pages from a virology textbook, research logs, and lab reports. They were marked with an official university letterhead, addressed to Dr. Howard Ellis, a prominent figure in the university's Department of Virology. Dr. Ellis was something of a legend. Some said he was working on cutting-edge solutions to diseases. Others whispered that his research was too extreme for standard ethical guidelines. The scattered documents made references to terms like genetically engineered viral vectors and extended cellular regeneration. I didn't fully understand them, but certain phrases stuck out: subject integration with plant species, unstable infection pathways, and human immune response compromised. At the bottom of one page, in Dr. Ellis's neat handwriting, was a note that chilled me. Combining viral components with botanical cell structures could pave the way for indefinite life. If controlled properly, this will be a new era for humanity. If not... The sentence ended there. It appeared some pages were missing. This left me with a million questions. What did Dr. Ellis have to do with the rumored zombie virus? Why were these documents hidden among the greenhouse supplies? My suspicion grew that the greenhouse was more than just a place to grow exotic plants. Perhaps it was an extension of Dr. Ellis's experimental domain. Though terrified, I also felt a surge of adrenaline. If Dr. Ellis's work was linked to the outbreak, maybe the greenhouse held clues about the virus, and maybe even how to stop it. Despite the horror unfolding outside, I tried to cling to hope. Day 3. I spent the night huddled in a small corner office inside the greenhouse, using a few blankets intended for delicate plants during cold snaps. When morning came again, I carefully unlatched a side door to see if it was safe to step out. The air smelled stale and ominous, but I didn't see or hear anything that suggested immediate danger. I wanted to get to the virology department building to find out more. That meant crossing the courtyard, an exposed open area. Standing at the greenhouse threshold, I felt my breath catch. My mind replayed the images from just 2 days before, the frenzy, the screams, and the blurred shapes of the infected. Was it truly safe now? Cautiously, I took a few steps forward. The campus roads lay empty, a small breeze stirring leaves along the pavement. I crept toward the science building, hoping to find it unoccupied. But halfway there, I heard what sounded like a shuffle. I froze. Over near a cluster of hedges, something moved, swaying as it walked. My stomach clenched. A single figure emerged, arms hanging loosely at its sides, head tilted at an unnatural angle. It staggered a few steps, feet dragging on the ground. Though it was far enough that I couldn't see the face clearly, I recognized the posture. A slow, mechanical gait. This was one of the zombies. I had no idea who it used to be. A fellow student, a professor, or a visitor. All that remained was the motion of something that was once human, now driven by the virus coursing through its veins. I backed away. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure it would hear me. Once I was out of sight, I sprinted back into the greenhouse, shut the door, and locked it again. My chest heaved with each panicked breath. There was no way I could make it to the virology labs alone, not with those things wandering around. The entire campus was probably crawling with more of them. I decided to focus on surviving a little longer in the greenhouse. I had water from the irrigation system, and I could scrounge up enough edible plant matter to keep from starving for a while. At least until I figured out a plan. Day 4. One of the greenhouse's automated systems was still partly functioning, presumably running on a backup generator. The lights would flicker on every few hours, and the fans that regulate temperature and humidity still kicked in. This was a blessing, but it also revealed a new, unsettling development. Many of the plants in the greenhouse were changing color. Leaves turned a pale grayish-green, almost as if they were losing chlorophyll. A sticky residue formed along the stems of some genetically modified vines. Despite my limited knowledge, I knew this wasn't normal. These plants were not just wilting from neglect, they seemed to be reacting to something else. I remembered the documents mentioning subject integration with plant species. Could it be that this greenhouse was ground zero for a variant of the zombie virus that affects plants? That thought was too disturbing to consider seriously, yet the evidence was right in front of me. The changes in color and texture could indicate an infection crossing species lines. If that was true, then everything inside this greenhouse might be compromised. Fear sent icy chills down my spine. I still needed food and water, but interacting with these plants could pose a risk. Could the virus spread from plant to human? The documents seemed to hint that was exactly what Dr. Ellis was researching. Before I could decide on a new plan, I heard low moans outside the greenhouse walls. I peered through a gap in the shutters and saw at least 4 zombies wandering near the perimeter. They were drawn to something. Their milky, unseeing eyes were fixed on the glass structure. Their hands brushed against the outer walls, leaving faint smears in the condensation. Why were they gathering here? Could it be the plants inside? The infected individuals seemed captivated by the greenhouse. My instincts told me that Dr. Ellis's monstrous vision involved plants as more than just botanical experiments. I realized then that if the outside zombies somehow got in, I would be trapped in a glass cage with both them and these changing plants. Day 5. Sleep came in fragments, filled with nightmares of stumbling figures and decaying leaves. By the time dawn arrived, I decided to do a more thorough search of the greenhouse. There was a storage room I hadn't fully explored yet, one that Dr. Baines always kept locked. Using a small hammer, I finally broke the flimsy lock. The storage room was cramped, cluttered with old terracotta pots, bags of fertilizer, and crates of lab equipment. Shoved into a corner, I found a large trunk. Inside it were more documents, and one small container, labeled in Dr. Ellis's distinctive handwriting, Botanical Viral Sample 13. My hands shook as I lifted the container. It was sealed in multiple layers of protective plastic. I could see a viscous, greenish fluid inside, dotted with what looked like small seeds. The label included the words, Initial Trials, Enhanced Plant-Human Integration. My heart pounded. This was no ordinary research. If there was any doubt before, now I was sure. Dr. Ellis had been experimenting with ways to merge living human cells and plant cells, using viral agents as the binding mechanism. I had to set it down. The magnitude of it made me feel nauseated. Here I was, in the very hub of an abomination that had likely contributed to the zombie outbreak. The question gnawing at my mind was why? Why pursue such a drastic line of research? Did Dr. Ellis aim to conquer mortality? Or was it some misguided attempt at leaps in medical science? I flipped through the documents quickly. Most were notes about virus cultures and plant tissue experiments, but one page stood out, containing a short, frantic entry, possibly a journal excerpt from Dr. Ellis himself. I fear the outbreak we've seen in humans is only the first wave. My work with plant matter indicates the virus can replicate in chloroplasts. Though I designed the viral load for beneficial uses, the mutation is impossible to control. It no longer responds to known treatments. If it spreads beyond the lab, it could mark the end of the world as we know it. I read that sentence over and over. It could mark the end of the world. Had he known, even before the first signs of the apocalypse, that his virus had gone too far? Day 6. It's nighttime again. I've set up a small lamp powered by a hand crank generator I found in the back of the greenhouse. The outside is black except for the distant glow of emergency floodlights that remain sporadically lit around campus. I can hear them, the infected, or zombies, shuffling around. At times I even hear a faint scratch against the greenhouse door. They know I'm in here, or they sense something inside that calls to them. I wonder if it's just me, or if the infected plants are drawing them closer. Through the day, I've watched the leaves curl and sway without any breeze. The vines actually seem to shift when I walk by, as if they're attuned to my presence. It might be my imagination, yet I can't deny that the environment feels alive in a way it shouldn't. When I use the lamp's light to examine the leaves, they exhibit a film on their surface, like the texture of damp moss, but tinted a greyish hue. Some potted flowers have begun to droop, releasing a pungent odour that's sweet and sour at the same time. I can't identify it, but it makes me lightheaded if I stand too close. The dryness in my mouth reminds me I need to drink. I check the irrigation lines, fill a cup with water from the greenhouse's filtration system, and pray that the system itself isn't contaminated. Each sip feels risky, but dehydration isn't an option. I have to trust that the filters are good enough. A muffled thud against the exterior glass causes me to nearly drop my cup. I inch over to the shutters. Through a crack, I see more silhouettes stumbling around. They don't go away even if I shout or try to scare them off. It's like they're locked in a trance, patrolling the greenhouse perimeter. Day 7. At some point this afternoon, I decided to document everything I've observed so far, hence these entries. If I lose my mind, or if something happens to me, at least someone might discover these notes. I also spent time exploring the deeper recesses of the greenhouse. I found a locked metal door leading into a narrow corridor. It must connect to the virology research annex that Dr. Ellis used. If there's any chance of finding a countermeasure or a cure, it might be there. Unfortunately, that door is heavily reinforced. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get it open. I suspect it requires an electronic keycard or maybe a special code. My ID badge for the botany department clearly isn't enough. I thought about smashing the glass walls of the greenhouse to escape, but I'd likely step into a horde of zombies waiting for me. Besides, the walls are thick and reinforced, and if I broke them, I'd risk letting the infected inside. On top of that, the campus beyond is so quiet and tense that I can't imagine how I'd get far without attracting attention. Every so often, I find myself talking to the plants, as if they can hear me. I'm desperate for any form of company, even if it's just my own echo bouncing off the greenhouse glass. Day 8. I can't ignore the plant's condition anymore. They aren't just passively transforming, they're growing more quickly than normal. Some vines have stretched across the walkways overnight. A cluster of large leaves now arches over one corner, forming a canopy that wasn't there before. This accelerated growth is unnatural, reminiscent of a body reacting to a fever. In a patch of genetically modified tomatoes, the fruits have turned from red to a murky brown. Their skins look translucent, and they pulsate faintly when I shine a light on them. I haven't dared to touch them. Who knows if they're full of the zombie virus? I can't be entirely certain, but I suspect the virus has integrated with the greenhouse ecology. The life forms in here might be merging, just as the documents hinted. Plant cells and viral agents, replicating and mutating in synergy. The outside world deals with standard zombies, but in here the infection has a different face, one of twisted botanical life. I recall Dr. Ellis's note about indefinite life. Is that what's happening? Are these plants in some stage of unstoppable growth, fueled by the virus? It's a terrifying possibility. I can't help but feel the greenhouse itself is turning against me. Day 9. They got in today, or at least a few of them did. I was rummaging in the storage area when I heard glass splintering from one of the lesser-used entrances. A group of zombies, 3 or 4, had shattered part of the greenhouse door. I still don't understand how they managed it, unless the structural integrity was weakened by the vines clinging to the frame. I panicked and ran deeper into the greenhouse, trying not to make noise. My path was blocked by heavy foliage that hadn't been there just days before. I tripped over a creeping vine and nearly fell face first into a row of drooping flowers. From the corner of my eye, I saw them shuffle in. Their skin looked greyish, as if drained of colour, and their eyes were vacant. They lumbered forward with uneven steps, occasionally lurching in quick bursts when they sensed movement. A moan echoed across the greenhouse interior, mingling with the hum of the fans. My heart thundered in my chest. I tucked myself behind a large row of planters hugging the damp soil. Every second felt like an eternity, expecting them to notice me, to close in. But then something pulled their attention away, some shift in the plants. One of the vines seemed to snake along the ground toward them. The zombies turned as if entranced, letting out low groans as the vine brushed against their ankles. I watched in disbelief as the infected pressed their hands into the creeping vines. They stood there motionless, as if communing with the living plants. Then I heard an unearthly sound, like a low pulsing beat. The plants shuddered and the zombies seemed to stiffen. It was as if the virus in them recognized a counterpart in the mutated foliage. I used that moment to slip away, making my way toward another section of the greenhouse that was still secured. My mind reeled, though, with the realization the greenhouse plants and the zombies were connected through the infection. Day 10. I moved my sleeping spot to a cramped supply closet near the emergency exit. Not that it offers much protection if more zombies break in, but at least it's hidden. I left the trunk with Dr. Ellis's files under a loose floor panel so that if something happens, maybe the truth won't be lost. In the depths of the night, I heard a faint clicking noise near the locked door to the virology annex. Curious, I crept toward it, staying low to the ground. My lamp was off to avoid attracting attention. As I approached, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. Something or someone had opened it from the other side. I swallowed hard and slipped through the gap, entering a narrow corridor. Dim emergency lights flickered overhead. The corridor smelled of chemicals and stale air. Doors on either side led to small labs or offices. Most looked ransacked or abandoned. At the corridor's end, I found a larger sealed room. A sign read, "High-Level Containment Lab." Inside, I discovered a single occupant slumped against a table. Dr. Howard Ellis himself. He appeared weak, pale. He didn't move when I approached. A laptop on the table showed blinking error messages. A partially typed document was visible on the screen reading, "This is my final log." The virus has proven unstoppable once introduced to human and plant ecosystems. Attempts at a cure have been unsuccessful. The unique splicing that once held so much promise has become a nightmare. If anyone finds this, please know I never intended the apocalypse. I wanted to... The text ended abruptly. Before I could read further, Dr. Ellis stirred. His eyes opened. They were dull and clouded, but there was a faint glimmer of consciousness, like he was in some intermediate state, neither fully human nor fully turned. He made a rasping sound, trying to speak. I leaned forward, terror and compassion warring inside me. "Stay back," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "The zombie virus. It's in me. It's in all of us now. There's no controlling it." I didn't know what to say. Tears burned my eyes. "Is there a cure?" I managed to ask. He gave a weak shake of his head. "The original formula was meant to extend life," he croaked. "I didn't see how it could mutate into this, the outbreak, the end of the world. I'm sorry." His gaze fixed on something behind me, and I noticed a creeping vine coiling through a crack in the lab window, inching across the floor. Dr. Ellis watched it as if fascinated. Then, in a final act of will, he pressed a button on the table, some sort of override switch. The lights flickered, and the containment lab's door hissed open behind him. "Leave me," he said hoarsely. "Don't let them find you. Don't trust the plants. They are infected. Part of it all now." With that, he closed his eyes. He looked peaceful, as if resigned to whatever came next. The vine reached him, curled around his leg, and I couldn't bear to watch. I bolted, racing back through the corridor until I reached the greenhouse. I sealed the annex door behind me as best I could, though I knew the breach was already made. Day 11. Back in the main greenhouse, the tension is worse. The zombies that broke in still roam, but they move with an unsettling purpose, as though guided by the plants. Some remain near the door, while others shuffle around the nutrient tanks. The vines have grown so dense in certain areas that entire walkways are blocked. I keep trying to find a path to escape, but every route is littered with either thick botanical growth or a cluster of the infected. My only solace is that I know the greenhouse's layout better than anyone. Dr. Baines once joked that I should carry a map in my head. Now I rely on that map to stay hidden. My biggest fear is running out of water. The filtration system seems to be faltering. Occasionally, the faucets sputter, leaving me with only a trickle. My food supply mostly consists of sealed protein bars left in the storage area, but they won't last indefinitely. Still, Part of me is convinced there might be a solution in the virology annex, some note or formula Dr. Ellis left behind. But going back there with the vines spreading is beyond dangerous. I can't risk being trapped if the corridor gets overrun. Day 12. Last night, I had a vivid dream, more like a vision. In it, I was walking among the mutated plants, touching the leaves without fear. My skin had the same greyish tint as the zombie-like creatures outside, yet I wasn't mindless. Instead, I felt connected to the greenhouse, like I could feel every vine and blossom as if it were an extension of my own body. The dream was both freeing and horrifying. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart hammering. Am I starting to show symptoms of infection? I haven't been bitten. At least I don't think so. But maybe it doesn't matter. If the virus can pass from plants to humans, even breathing this air might be enough. The greenhouse is sealed, but it's also full of these new spores. My head aches constantly now, and my skin feels clammy. Sometimes I think I can sense a faint pulsing in the air, as if the plants have a heartbeat. Day 13. One of the zombies came extremely close to finding me today. I was hidden behind a row of large ferns, waiting for it to pass. As it moved by, I noticed the side of its neck was covered in fibrous threads, almost plant-like. A portion of its face had a pattern reminiscent of a leaf's veins. This is no longer just a normal zombie. It's become a hybrid of plant and human, fully infected by Dr. Ellis's creation. I had to clamp my hand over my mouth to stifle a cry. The creature paused, its head tilting as if it sensed me. Then the ferns themselves began to sway, their leaves brushing against the zombie in a gentle, almost tender manner. The creature moaned softly and continued forward, out of sight. I didn't move for 10 whole minutes, paralyzed with fear and revulsion. Day 14. Time is stretching out. Survival is becoming a day-to-day, hour-to-hour challenge. I don't know what remains of the world beyond the university campus. For all I know, the rest of civilization could be in ruins. The news broadcasts are gone, cell signals are dead. Everything is silent except for the occasional emergency alert that repeats on my phone, each one a variant of zombie outbreak or seek immediate shelter. My last hope is that maybe an evacuation team will come, but so far no one has arrived. I hear no helicopters, no rescue vehicles. The apocalypse feels total. I keep returning to that trunk of documents, scanning them for anything that might indicate a safe haven or a method to halt the spread. But there's nothing conclusive. Most of Dr. Ellis's records detail the rapid mutation once the virus adapted to plant biology. Without advanced lab equipment and knowledge, I can't do anything with these half-finished formulas. The greenhouse continues to transform. I see white, web-like filaments weaving across the floor at night. The overhead lights flicker more often. A thin, greenish mist sometimes collects near the corner vents. My lungs feel heavier each day and I occasionally experience dizzy spells. Day 15. Today, I discovered a new possibility. The outer door that was shattered by the zombies has been nearly sealed up by creeping vines, almost as if the greenhouse is regenerating its own wounds. But there's a narrow gap near the top where I might be able to slip through if I climb carefully. It's risky. The zombies outside might notice me. The mutated plants might also react violently, but staying here indefinitely is not an option. I've packed a small bag with a water bottle, some protein bars, and Dr. Ellis's documents. If I make it out, I'll try to find help. If I don't, well, there's nothing left to lose. Day 16. I'm writing this final entry as I prepare to make my escape. The moans outside the greenhouse are quieter than before. Perhaps the zombies have moved on, or maybe they're hiding in the shadows, waiting. My plan is simple. Slip through the gap before the vines can close completely. Once I'm outside, I'll try to find a working vehicle or a route off campus. If that fails, I'll keep running until I can't run anymore. Before I go, I can't help but look around the greenhouse one last time. The once familiar plants, the irrigation systems, the rows of carefully labeled specimens. They all seem like relics of a world that no longer exists. The air is thick with the virus, with the spores that have turned this place into something both alive and monstrous. Part of me almost feels sorry for it, for this twisted garden that's caught in the crossfire of Dr. Ellis's grand experiment. In the distance, thunder rumbles, or maybe it's just a collapsing building somewhere on campus. The world is changing, unraveling into a place overrun by zombies and infected ecosystems. My heart hammers in my chest, not just from fear, but from a strange sense of anticipation. Maybe I'm already too far gone. Maybe the virus has infiltrated me in ways I don't fully understand. But I have to try. I have to believe there's some hope out there, beyond these glass walls and mutated vines. There's a part of me that wonders if I'll find anything left of civilization if I do manage to get out. Will I encounter more survivors, or only endless hordes of the infected? Is there a possibility that Dr. Ellis's research could be used for good? Or has that ship sailed, leaving only an endless zombie outbreak? I wish I had answers. All I can do is move forward, so I'm taking these notes, tucking them into my backpack. The character limit of my own courage is tested, but I have no choice. I'm going to climb through that gap, step into whatever remains of the outside world, and face whatever waits for me there. If you're reading this, maybe you found these pages on my body or salvaged from the greenhouse. Maybe you're in a different greenhouse halfway across the country, reading about the same unstoppable virus. My only plea is that you don't lose hope. Even if we're witnessing the end of the world, we're still human, and humans are resilient until the very last breath. And so, I leave this story without a final conclusion, because the end isn't written yet. Not for me, and not for the remnants of humanity trying to survive amidst this nightmare. The door is open, the vines are curling, and I'm about to make my move. Whatever happens next is up to fate. Thank you for listening. If this story sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps this channel alive. Until next time, stay vigilant and remember, curiosity can be quite the companion, and sometimes a curse.